So the recording should be going. All right, let's go ahead and get started, I guess. We're about 5 after, so thank you for hitting admit. We're going to talk a little bit about 1.0, which you released and announced about a month ago. I guess it's now at Grafana Online. And we'll maybe kind of briefly touch on some of the features that we discussed there. We have some real cool news and a roadmap to share for search, and Marty and Conrad are going to be talking about that some. They both spent some time recently kind of kickstarting that project, and I think we have some exciting news to share on that. And then some more news about Mario, which is not entirely spoiled by this line right here, which is 100% spoiled by that line right there. And then a couple of just issues in tempo and new features that we want to highlight because we think they're worth discussing for those of you who are operating tempo. And like I said, generally feel free to add anything to the agenda if you have any kind of questions or things you want us to address. And I'll just go ahead and put Q&A at the bottom. You can put things before that, but I'll just open up for general discussion if anybody has any kind of questions or just wants to talk about tempo generally. So to quickly talk about 1.0, we released it at Grafana Online, and we felt like it's a very stable place for the for tempo to be. It is kind of, we really spent maybe the last month or so focused on performance and stability. I think particularly in the ingesters, and really got focused on this kind of key value store that tempo was initially, like this high volume, inexpensive to operate, object storage kind of object storage dependency backend. And that was really the focus about 1.0. And we think we did a really good job of hitting that. I think our costs were, I can't remember, or we were doing like CPU or spans per CPU, and we were in the like 8,000 or 9,000s, I think, the last time I looked. So 9,000 spans per second per CPU. And then that includes all elements of tempo and a 14-day retention, which is what we do operate internally. So really happy with where 1.0 is, but we're going to talk about some exciting features. And honestly, once we get some of these in, they might be 2.0 search. Once search is involved and complete and cut, that might, when that's stable and we feel confident, that might be tempo 2.0. Also put a quick note in there. If you are on stable and you want to stay on a stable release, please use 1.0.1. There was one bug that was fixed and patched there where if you shut down an ingester too quickly and you didn't let it gracefully exit, it would sometimes corrupt its wall. And the fix was just to prevent a panic on restart, basically. So what tempo should do, or the ingester specifically, is replay the wall until it finds some kind of corruption or some kind of issue, and then stop and log a message if there is an issue, but still have replayed everything that it was able to. That's what we're seeing internally. So 1.0 is boring, and nobody wants to hear about that. Marty, or I don't know how you all organize this, so why don't you all jump in here and just kind of talk to us about what search is.
Sure. So I'll start. So I guess about a month ago during GrafanaCon Online, we talked about search being a really big thing for tempo, something we saw on the horizon. And it kind of got a jump start in the past couple of weeks. We did an internal hackathon at Grafana Labs, and we chose to hack on tempo search. And so it came along a lot faster than we thought. So I have some timelines and things and that I can walk through. So let me go ahead and share something here. Cool. Okay, cool. I guess everybody can see that okay. So let's see. So there's kind of a lot going on here, but I'll kind of walk through the timeline, and then we're going to do a demo at the end. So like, it'll be really cool, but I guess it's good to talk about maybe the whole picture and where we are and where we're going to go first. So there's kind of like 3 phases that we're going to do this with. The first one is very basic, and that's what you'll see sooner. It's a basic search API, searching data in the ingesters. So that includes live traces in memory, traces that have been flushed disk on the ingester, right? So this is kind of like maybe like the last 5-10 minutes, an hour of data. And then a new kind of experimental UI in Grafana. So that will, because the current one only does lookup by trace ID, so there will be some UI changes that come along with that for the capabilities. The next phase is extending that search to the entire backend, right? So kind of like going very wide in parallel with the search. Kind of at the same time, down here at the bottom, we have started already and will be throughout the whole process working on what we would really like to see, which is full-featured query language, specifically for searching traces. We kind of hinted at that at the Grafana Online before. I don't have the slides, but I think what we want to do something that's going to be easy to pick up and make sense and kind of fit in with Loki and Prometheus and things like that. Then the last phase is implementing that language and finishing off the UI. So that's kind of like 3 phases that we see Tempo Search going in. Cool. Let's see. So the phase 1, so this is where we're at, and this is kind of like what we'll see hopefully pretty soon, I think probably within a month, right? Basic search capability, so service name operation. Operation is also the span name, so this will be things like very basic things that should already exist in most tracing data. Duration, right? Slow, fast traces. Tags, so the URL, HTTP status code, custom tags like database queries or customer IDs, things like that. The UI that I mentioned. And then kind of like just to talk about the way we're approaching this, because the Tempo TCO is important, as we're kind of like trying to do this in a very specific way where we can maintain a low TCO while adding search without increasing the cost very much. So the approach we're going so far is to use an efficient data format called flat buffers. It is a format where the on-disk format and the in-memory are the same. So there's no parsing or decoding required to process that data. So it should be very efficient, very fast. And the other thing is that we're going to make search optional. So there are a lot of other solutions out there, or at least Tempo has existed for this long without search capabilities. So there are going to be a lot of installations or maybe people using it that already have a solution in place, like logs or exemplars or things like that. And so we'll make it optional so we can keep it turned off to reduce costs further when that makes sense. This slide's a little complicated, but I thought it would be good to walk through for anyone who's interested in Tempo internals. We will the data flow kind of goes the data flow kind of goes around starting at the distributor, right? So we will be extracting kind of metadata from the trace, those top level attributes, the basic tags and things like that that we want to search on, the duration, start time. Those are extracted in flight and then sent to the ingester, just like the normal trace data is. The data doesn't go anywhere off the ingester to start. That's kind of like the phase 2 that I mentioned, where then we'll start persisting to the back end. And then the querier and the query front end will we have the new API to call the ingesters in the backends to query that data. Cool. Yeah, so I think that is probably okay for kind of like talking about the timeline and kind of like the immediate goals. And then so now I guess we could show off like a little working demo. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So this is at what, 10 million spans per second? Is that what this demo is going to be over?
Well, it has to run on my MacBook, so it's a bit less.
Oh boy, live demo time. Pressure's on.
I have faith. It'll go perfectly.
All right. Yeah, it's a live demo. Yeah, I just had some trouble setting it up, but it should work now. So let's see. I should see Grafana right now. Okay. So yeah, I'll just show off a bit how it works. So we have also adapted Grafana. So the Tempo data source here has beside the trace ID box also has a search box. And in this search box, you can fill in the query, which consists of a series of tags that you're searching for within your trace. So how it works right now is you could, for instance, search for all traces that have a root span with a specific name. So you would start searching on root because you want to find something from the root span. Then you can search for the tag name, for instance. And then we've also implemented autocomplete, so it will suggest a couple of names that were present within the trace data. So in this case, I can, for instance, take the /card, which is some kind of endpoint in this trace generator, and then you can run the query and it will return the results with like a little summary of the trace. So you have the name of the trace, you have the start time of the trace, and also the duration. And then, as usual, you can click on the trace ID and you get the full trace here. And then from here on, you can continue searching. So we've also implemented the minimum duration. So you could, for instance, search for all the traces that are longer than half a second. And, yeah, seems to cause a little problem right now. So, it's all very new, so there's still some bugs out there. We can try that again. Let's see if I take 200 milliseconds. Yeah, so yeah, all the traces should be longer than 200 milliseconds right now. So this can be a way to filter down and search for, the slowest traces, the slowest requests. And then from there on, you can also add more tags. So for instance, I know in this trace data, you have like a region tag, I think. So it's some tag that's also set. I can also continue searching on that. So for instance, I want to have all the traces that have the region tag, and it should have the region east, for instance. And then it will filter the traces again and only show the traces that have a span containing that tag somewhere. I'm not sure if I can show this right now, but the tag search is actually not a complete match, but it searches for, it's a strings contains. So for instance, if I would search for US, it would match with all tags that contain US. So there would be US East and US West, or whatever your trace data is like.
Nice.
Yep.
Good save on that error, by the way.
It just refresh a couple of times and then it's solved.
It's fine. It's all right. Just hit F5. It'll be fine.
There was a problem with that one block. Yeah, so there's definitely some
it's a race
handling and
condition or
things like that.
something.
Yeah.
And then besides this, we've also implemented the Jaeger API. So the Jaeger data source also works in Grafana. So you can also search, send a Jaeger query. It should be possible. Something is going wrong, apparently. And the Jaeger UI should also work, but maybe it's also causing some troubles right now. No, this works. So this is also possible.
So that is the Jaeger UI actually hitting tempo, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Through a plugin, right? So this is a different front end if you wanted to use this. It's kind of independent of Grafana. If you enjoy using the Jaeger UI, you'll be able to point it directly at tempo once we get this API out there.
Yeah, in this case, I'm running tempo in a single binary. And besides it, I'm running tempo query, which is the converter from Jaeger API to the tempo API.
Cool.
So in this case, you have to run two components next to each other.
Cool.
Yeah, that's what I can show for now.
So yeah, we have one question. Hey, Kunrad, could you switch back over to like the table output? Or yeah, the tempo. Yeah, maybe just try searching for something real quick.
And maybe this is a bit too much. Yeah, I'll just add I'll add a filter for now. Okay.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah. So, I mean, we have talked about what makes sense to display here. I think that's something that we'll continue to define. Trace name, start time, and duration were just very basic ones that we went with for kind of like just getting started quickly. But I mean, I think maybe we would want to, and we have talked about maybe other attributes that we could pull out. But yeah, I don't know. It depends on so where we end up, like the query language itself. You know, we may have other parts in there that affect the way this is displayed, and so I'm not sure that where we'll end up with the final Grafana UI.
So this is kind of a thing, obviously, we're developing right now. If you have input, this would be a great time to take it, because we can give it back to the Grafana team as they're actively developing it. So if anyone has any kind of thoughts here about additional things they'd want in this UI or on this table, please let us know.
I had a question. The query language that you're just using, how close would that be to Jaeger's query forms? Because they have some standard sort of parameters like a start, end, limit, look back, service, and so on and so forth that they would use to pass parameters to the backend of Jaeger to do the query against, for example, Elasticsearch or whatnot. Would there be any correlation between these, or you are having your own, let's say, naming and phrasing and API for search, and that's REST APIs, not internal or something?
Sure, yeah, so they are very close. And actually, Jaeger API compatibility was our first initial goal. And then, so that will work. Like if you're using Tempo Query, which is not really required anymore, that is something that we will have. And that's where we started out, Joe. So the tags and the duration of filtering will work. It will be compatible. The query language there is not really a language, it's just a set of tags. So I think that actually matches up with the entry on the Jaeger UI as well. There may be some elements that we won't support, like the look back, and also the service name and operation. We may not go with that terminology, but it may just be tags that you pick. Operation is really just the span name. I think in the OpenTelemetry protocol, it's just called the span name. So operation, not terminology, might not make sense there, but yeah, it should be compatible.
And
So something we're still dealing with is, or talking about, is like this autocomplete field that they typed in is really cool. One option would be to go to something much more Jaeger-like, where you just have a service dropdown, an operation name dropdown, and like a free form for the tags. So that's another path that could take, and nothing is really set in stone now. I can't say I was actually in favor of going to the Jaeger style, where it's all the dropdowns, but I really like how clean that autofill was, like the auto suggest was. So it might make sense to keep that. I don't know.
And one other question, just for me to see, how much analytics can we run on the data that is going to be stored in Tempo for attributes like time and duration and so on and so forth, along with other data sources? Can we use this in conjunction to run graphs and heat maps, for example, for duration of operations, and plot that over, let's say, Prometheus's response time, or take a look at Loki's error rate and plot all of this together, or it is not being looked at that way?
Sure. So extracting metrics from a query is definitely something that we would like to do in the future. I'm not sure how quick or how feasible that is, right? Because that would be maybe a very large time window of traces to process. So I think that's something we just have to figure out. But no, there's no immediate plans. Part of it also is impacted by just the query language, like how we end up there with wrapping it with aggregates and bringing those things like that in, so you could plot something. We had actually talked about maybe something that is easy in Grafana is plotting the duration for the search results that are actually returned. I mean, stuff like that is pretty easy, but I think if to go any further in analytics, I think is really hard to say.
Okay. Because one of the things that is very sort of informative in at least Jaeger UI is that bubble chart, whatever chart you're gonna call it. I don't know the name. That is very useful to have a quick glance at what's going on over a span of time with the operations that you would filter through that sidebar of Jaeger GUI. And I was thinking that having that and then plot that over with something that you read from Prometheus about the service's internal operation and put that on how it is being viewed from external sources would be very informative. But I guess you said that's going to be taking a longer time to execute as a query. So probably not for version 2.
Right. I'd say our immediate plans are focused around search, but definitely in the back of our minds while we design this query language is metrics and a lot of these other things that people want. So it is something we're thinking about, but right now we're just focused on search. I would say after we start wrapping up search, we might start talking about that next. And if you stay connected to the community, you'll start getting more news about that. Super.
Thank you.
Sure.
So does this remove the need for the logging of the trace ID? Because instrumenting, I don't know, I've got like 8 applications now instrumented and another 10 to go, and that part is painful.
Sure. So with regard to that, I guess in a sense, right, maybe there's things you could put on a log line that would not quite work with, that are not part of your spans, in which case the log line is technically more flexible. But yes, this should kind of remove that need. To what you just said with the instrumentation, I'd encourage you to look at the agent's like automatic logging option, so which would not require you to do like these additional log lines per application if you don't want to. In that case, the agent just writes a log line for every single trace that comes through and will kind of set up that index for you automatically. Obviously not as flexible as doing it yourself, but much easier to get started with. Also, real quick on the metrics, we also have features in the agent where right now it will post histograms of span durations and counts on span names. So you can right now see like P99 of a span, P50, those kind of things, or like just total rate at which a particular span is created. So the agent, it's not obviously as flexible as like LogQL and Loki, but it is kind of a start in terms of getting metrics out of your traces. Let's see. Oh, I got some more. I think being able to display arbitrary tags in the table output is something we desire at Shopify as well. Okay. I will note that and take that back to the team. I was kind of wondering that myself when somebody said, what can you do with this table or customize? The first thing I thought of was it might be nice to be able to like say, if you see this tag in the trace, please put it on the table. That might help people choose which of the traces are relevant. And so I'll take that back to the team. That's a good note. Ooh, I should put this in the doc, shouldn't I? Let's see. An arbitrary. Oh, Marty's just saying Coonrad's branch is broken, and we can't accept empty queries, but it didn't quite work there.
No, that actually workbase was just this previous issue. So after refresh, it worked.
Okay. I really do like the idea of the arbitrary tags. I think that would be very valuable. Being able to search to cross-span boundaries, root.span equals cart, and trace contains span.status code equals 2, or that have, yeah, so that's something, so we have this kind of working group now where we're discussing with just some other members of the tracing community who are very advanced here, I suppose, as well as our team about the needs for querying traces. And one thing that has come up is kind of like these structural questions. This is much more difficult than just, does a trace contain a tag, right? Or is the root span name a certain thing? And so we're going to start with that, but we do see a future for this, including like structural questions, such as what you're saying, like, do you have a trace with this span name that is a descendant? I'm sorry, do you have a span with a certain name that is a descendant of another span with a name? Might be an instance of a structural question. Or like create a set of conditions on one span and say, is it a child of this other set of conditions anywhere in my trace? Those require cracking open a trace, marshalling them to some kind of internal format, and then just digging through them. This is much more difficult, but it is also on our list. I would think of that kind of on a similar timeline as metrics. Like we're going to tackle this first like core thing about search, and we want to do the things that everybody wants: duration and span names and operation names and tag names and these things. And then we're going to start looking to the community after that what to prioritize next. And I would say metrics and these kind of structural questions are both, in my mind, high on that list as obvious kind of next things to move to. But I would love to get feedback from different teams using Tempo to see, what direction they think the team should move.
Cool. Yeah, that first kind of query, I think we can actually support already. The root span is /cart, and it also contains a status code too. If those aren't on any related spins, I mean, I think that would actually work today.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so you do like the root.name, and then you just also say span.tag equals, and that'll cover both those cases. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Regarding the language, we intend to spend some time just kind of with a very small group, working through the details and hashing out something that makes sense to us, at which point we will post that publicly for comment and kind of take a round of comments from the community. The idea, of course, being making sure that all of the things we came up with would be meet the needs of the community and do what people expect from a trace language. But the first pass, we want to be just kind of a more focused group so we can move faster and hopefully cover ground quickly. Cool. Fantastic demo. And I'm super excited about this. This Grafana hackathon thing really gave Marty and Kunrad a chance to get focused and provide some enormous value in a short time, just really bootstrap this project. And it's really neat to see. Is there any other questions? Would watch again. That's right. 5 out of 5. Any other questions regarding this?
I had a comment on there's with the UI side on Grafana. So there's a mention of like, hey, we can have like some drop downs or the autofill text. But if you go to look at the Loki interface, that has both, right? You can type in, you can start your logql selector, and it will help autofill it in for you with suggestions. But if you're like, I don't know where to start, you hit the browser thing and you get that big panel that nicely, once Ed helped me out and I realized I was blocking an API, that as you select certain ones, it filters out the others, right? So that you only see like, oh, what's included in the path that I've selected, right? So I've hit this API. Oh, this doesn't have all those other tags. It only has these ones, right? But that way your two interfaces would be consistent between them.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity here, and the team has already put together some basic things like, please show me a bunch of span names, or show me the span names, show me the service names, show me the values that a tag may have, right? Is that true? I think that's true. Okay, that's true. Good. Good. And I think we'll definitely take a lot of learning from the existing Loki UI and try to build both kind of things, right? Like this live query thing where if you want to type and have ultimate flexibility, and also some of these more like clicking kind of elements. The Loki UI is very mature, of course, because Loki's been around quite a bit longer. And at first it was just a freeform text field, and they've added the autocomplete, and they've added a lot of these nice features. So I would expect the kind of tempo search to maybe follow a similar path where at first, we have a text field and we're going to be adding a lot of these things as we go along. Maybe with a little bit of luck, we can start with some of that since we've seen the success in Loki. People love that in Loki, as well as we already have all of these calls that we know how they work, and we know we can get what we want, span names and service names and such. Cool. Yeah, I did not prep Mario for this. Mario, do you want to talk about service graphs at all? I've told the team, we've talked as a team, and I think the two things that we really want to be pushing forward on are search, and I think Marty and Kunrad are leading that, and then Mario is going to be leading service graph creation along with some Grafana team members. I know you don't have anything prepared because I didn't say anything to you before right now. But if you wanted to say some brief words about kind of like our thoughts on that, I think that might be valuable.
Right. Yeah, of course. So we have this other project called Service Graphs. The idea is to create the topology of the system based on tracing data. So it just brings more value to instrumenting your system with tracing, basically. Yeah, so we have already done some work on this area. We have some ideas on how to implement it. We're looking into doing this work during the ingestion of the traces, especially during the collection, rather. So as traces are being collected in the Grafana agent, we can generate the necessary data to build these service graphs. Also, most likely, the data will be in form of Prometheus metrics. So we can, well, this is all up to discussion still, but yeah, one thought is that we can see those service graphs and how they evolve over time. So you not only have like the instant picture of the system, but you can see how latencies or how services are interacting between early this morning and then in the afternoon if your access pattern changed and so on. Yeah.
Cool. One thing we are talking about in the service graph, and the reason Mario is setting this up, is because these tend to be generated in the agent. We have features in the agent to drop spans and drop traces to downsample before you push to Grafana Cloud or to a Tempo backend, in which case you would want to calculate metrics or calculate service graphs before that moment to give you the best possible view of your systems. Cool. So that's not quite as far along. We still need some work there, and a lot of that's going to be UI work to do that well. Is it possible to trace a call that spans across multiple Tempo backends? If you mean query a trace, you mean like query a trace that ended up in multiple Tempo backends? Trace a call? Yes. So yes, technically, but that's actually a Grafana enterprise feature, and so it is not in the open source project. You could write a front end to do that yourself, but the actual feature as released by Grafana will be an enterprise product. As part of we have I think it's called GEM, right? Grafana Enterprise Metrics. We have Grafana Enterprise Logs and traces as well. And it will be, plans for federating. Wow, everybody has the same question. It is actually, oddly, under development now and should be wrapped up soon, but it will be part of our enterprise offering. Sorry, open source people. I would love to tell you otherwise, but I don't make those decisions. Cool. Cool. Next up on the list, this was totally not spoiled because I didn't just type it right in here, but Mario was made a maintainer since our last community call. It's actually been a while. I think maybe almost a month and a half, right? Since we made him a maintainer, but we haven't had a community call, and I really wanted to highlight his work. He's done an enormous amount of work in the agent to add almost all of the features we announced at Grafana Online, where his work in the agent and integrating with the OpenTelemetry collector. He's done some upstream work there as well. He's done some work in Tempo. He is fantastic about reviewing PRs that I don't know how he does it because he has almost no context. He jumps into a code base he's never seen before, and he provides insightful comments. We are very excited to have him on the team, and I think he'll continue to be an awesome member of this team, and we look forward to service graphs. Mario.
Yeah, well, thanks, Joe, and all the team. Yeah, I'm very grateful to be a maintainer, and I'm very excited to keep working on Tempo. I mean, just look at search, and it's a very rich field, and so many things to come. Yeah, I cannot be other than excited to work on Tempo.
Cool. Yeah, very, very excited to have you, man. You've been a great member of the Grafana team, Tempo team. Cool. So there are a couple of things more like technical related to the operation of Tempo that have happened recently that I wanted to talk about. So we're going to kind of maybe finish up, our part of that with this. And then after that, we'll have this kind of Q&A period, and you're welcome to hit us with any questions that anyone may have. The first is this idea, and there's a link in the doc about hedging requests. We are, of course, querying a backend like an object storage, right? S3 or GCS. And we were seeing wide arrays of latency on this backend. So our P50 was nice. It was a couple hundred milliseconds. It was very low when we were requesting data from the backend, but sometimes it would go to 3 or 4 seconds. And that was kind of our P999 almost. But the way we did our search, we were kind of bound by this long tail. So if a request to the backend took 3 seconds, it would bring down the entire trace search, and the entire trace search would then cost 3 seconds, no matter what we did. And it was heavily impacting our P99. So we found this idea of hedged requests. The PR, I think, links to the library we used. If you use Go and you have a similar kind of problem, I'd recommend this library. It's a very cool library, and they made a lot of improvements for us, which we appreciate. And you can also see in that linked PR, just like our P99 tanking, it was like 10 to 20 seconds, and it tanked down to like right above P9, or P99 came to be basically right above P90 at 250 milliseconds. No, sorry, 2.5 seconds or so. And kind of the trick here is after a certain amount of time, you basically have a timeout, and it's configurable in Tempo. But after a certain amount of time, if the request doesn't come back, just issue it again. And it's kind of like what we all do naturally when you go to a website and it's spinning and you just hit F5 and it comes back instantly. It's the exact same idea. So what you do in your normal browsing, if something is not quite coming back and you're not sure why, it's just an attempt to cut off the long tail by just issuing a second request. And we've set our internal one at above the P99 we've set it above the P99 of GCS. And so the actual repeated request is less than 1%. And it just like demolished our P99 and brought it way down. And it's been an excellent addition to kind of the Tempo backend. I'd recommend, if you deal with anything similar, if you code in any kind of similar space, to check out this idea. And I think it's called the tail at scale. There's this whole nice paper about this. It's written by Google, of course, right? But it's just a nice paper about how to deal with these kind of long tail issues at scale. And this idea of hedge requests came from that paper. Cool. Member list. I have to bring member list up again. I feel like every other community call, we say, hey, member list is finally fine. It's stable. Yay. And then the next community call, I say, we found another problem and we're having issues with it. So this is the call where we say we're having problems with it, and we're continuing to research those. If you have a large production Tempo install, I would recommend maybe using console or etcd. We continue to use member list because we really want to get this production ready, and we want to see these problems and expose ourselves to them so we can get it fixed. And we have a member of the Cortex team actively working on figuring out what's going on here and getting a fix together, because all this code's in the Cortex code base. But if you're seeing similar issues, I would highly recommend maybe moving to console or etcd to store your ring. I know it's an extra dependency, but if you need a rock solid production kind of system, then I would recommend those approaches. The issue that we continue to see is the same, where we have an ingester or a compactor or a member of the ring we cannot forget. You click forget and it disappears for a while, and then it comes back, and it just messes everything up and makes you sad. So like I said, we have active development on this. We really want to get this production ready for all of our backends, Cortex, Tempo, and Loki. And unfortunately, Tempo is somehow the guinea pig. I don't know why that worked out that way, but we are the only internal member that uses member list right now until we can get this stable and make sure it provides, what everyone needs, which is a stable way to propagate the ring. But just a heads up on that kind of continuing saga of member list. Cool. Is anybody have any other questions or comments? The forget issue, that's right. Sorry, Zach. I recommend console or whatever. Any plans to support an auth proxy? Yeah, real quick to what Zach said, that is at some point where we've had to go to. And it's sad, where we've gotten it down to like where I think I can cycle all of our ops cluster in under a minute by bringing the entire thing down, which basically erases member lists. So member list is like in-memory ring that's gossiped between all of the different elements of the cluster. And one way to just destroy it is to literally bring down the whole cluster and bring it back. And we can do that in under a minute, which is not a good, well, it's good, I guess, that we can do that, but it's not good that we've had to do that. And I think we need this fixed. We need it fixed. I know you all need it fixed too. And I'd recommend looking maybe at a console CD installation. To the question of an auth proxy, I'd like to maybe hear a little bit more about what you mean by that. Like, we have an internal proxy that, it's no reason to open source this proxy because it integrates with our internal Grafana API and exchanges a token, make sure the token's valid, and then attaches that, that tenant ID, the Xscope org ID. So there's zero reason to open source this because it only works with our private authentication API. So if you could provide maybe some details about what you would want out of an auth proxy, maybe we could talk about what opportunities we might have to work on that. I think Cortex has one, is that right? And doesn't Loki use like an Nginx thing? I think there's been some other random attempts. I might be making this up. Isn't there like a open source Cortex gateway not maintained by Grafana? I think there is. I think it's this right here. And this, I don't know what this supports. Maybe like taking JOTs and turning them into tokens. I don't know. I guess my short answer is this is not on our roadmap. Basically, need to have a token-based authentication. We do use Grafana's auth proxy to authenticate users. A token-based authentication. So maybe something like this Cortex gateway, which I'm basically just scanning the README right now. So I don't really have deep operational experience here, but it looks like it'll exchange a JOT for a tenant ID. And I think that's perhaps what you're asking. In which case, the short answer is no, this is not on our list. Certainly, if people put effort into this, we would help support it. I wouldn't actively work against somebody putting this kind of feature together. This is nice. But we do not have any kind of work slated towards this right now. Oh, look, Dave Henderson actually has worked on this Cortex gateway. I didn't know that. He's one of our engineers on the host Grafana team. And then I think another thing that has come up kind of in this vein is our Helm charts. I think Loki has like an Nginx ingress proxy thing. Is that right? And people have asked us about putting that in our Helm charts as well. Thanks, Daniel. And I don't know, the Helm charts are very heavily community maintained. I will approve PRs and submit them, or approve PRs and merge them. And, every once in a while I'll pull the whole thing and test it and make sure things are looking good still. But we don't really do a whole lot of work internally maintaining that Helm chart. We use JSONet. And so it's kind of difficult for us to iterate on that because we don't use it and we don't see the output of it. I would say if anyone wants to PR that to the Helm chart, to the Helm repo, I would absolutely take it. But again, it's just kind of not on our short list. I wonder if at some point we should take a list of high priority features in the Helm chart to increase adoption and just spend a week and knock as many of them out as possible to help out the community, because it's difficult for us to know what people need because we don't use it. And I think as a result, it's not as good as it could be. Cortex has one as well. So the Cortex Helm chart has a Nginx thing. Okay. Yeah, let me talk with that internally with the team. It might be maybe my hackathon should be make the Helm chart way better. But having someone spend some time, a week or two, and just dig through the Helm chart and really help the team become familiar with it, I think I may be the only one who's installed it. Maybe one or two other members have installed it. I'm not sure. Having some more experience with it, as well as trying to add some of these features, could be very valuable. In fact, there's a Helm chart PR up right now, and I have not had a chance to read it. It's difficult for us to support it, unfortunately. But let me bring that up with the team and see if we can get somebody focused on kind of providing that same Nginx ingress thing, and then see if there's any kind of like proxy capabilities there or auth or anything like that. I don't really know what they have in those Nginx configs. The biggest problem is having the config file as a big string instead of an object. Actually, somebody just submitted a proposal and a new config structure, and I have not looked at it. I think the idea of that giant string is then you can override the whole file at once by just providing your own config file. And then I think it also lets them template in variables. So like you can add other config values at the values.yaml level, and it will template into the broader config. But I have not had a chance to look at this, and I'm just not a Helm chart guru by any stretch of the imagination. So it's just not something I can comment on well. Instead of a big string, I guess we want like well-formatted YAML. We want the YAML to be part of the values YAML. Is that kind of the goal here? And then we can override and build a config file directly in values YAML. Is that the goal?
Well, I'm not sure if that's the way to go, but having I'm not sure if Tempo has this problem, but Cortex has that multiple components share configs from other components. So some configs from like the distributor are defined in the ingester part. So that's also a problem. So I don't know if we can fix the general config before splitting the parameters.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like where every component shares the same config. It's not good. In fact, one of the things it does is it makes the ingesters in the Helm chart pull the backend, which they don't need to, and other pieces. So when we define our config, we turn off pulling from the ingesters because it doesn't need to happen. But the Helm chart will do that. So there are details that are not broken, but suboptimal because of this shared config, and I agree with that. If you do have any kind of feedback, there is this issue that was just open where somebody is trying to help us with the config. So please comment on that. If you have ideas, if you have experience in this area, and you comment on this issue, you can help me kind of evaluate this proposal and the submitted PR that went along with it. And I really appreciate it. Oh yeah, my bad. Thanks, Kunrad. Apparently I can't copy paste. Thank you. Cool. Thanks, Andre. An open telemetry collector exporter that acts as a distributor. Strangely, yes, we have discussed that. So basically, we would need to, on the ingester, support the OpenTelemetry. Right now, we support receipt of the OpenTelemetry gRPC service at the distributor level, but not the ingester level. The main reason we don't do that is because in the distributor, we do a lot of rate limiting. We have some like custom features there. And additionally, we support a replication factor. So every span for our cluster that comes into Tempo is replicated 3 times and sent to 3 ingesters. And this improves availability as well as durability of the data. So it would just require the OpenTelemetry collector to be a little bit of something it's not. Additional features, additional processors, and that's kind of why we haven't tackled that, although we have discussed it. Something else that concerns me is the collector. I think the collector will 200 before it's passed the data on. It buffers everything in a big queue, right? And so it will send success to the sending service before it will pass it down the line to the ingester. And something we value in Tempo is when we send a 200, we have passed this data onto at least 3 ingesters, and we feel very confident that the durability of this data is high. And we have said we have this data, we've stored it, whereas I don't think the collector supports that. I think the collector would immediately 200, and if it if the distributor fell apart before it was able to pass it on to the ingester, then we wouldn't actually have stored that data. So I think those are the main reasons we haven't done it. And the only reason I can talk about that a lot is because we've also had this discussion. We've also thought about doing this because the distributor is kind of this stateless piece which just passes on traces, but there's just enough functionality in the distributor to make it hard to replace it with a collector.
Yeah, I think functionality is probably going to diverge even further. I mean, just what we talked about today, search, a specialized functionality that wouldn't make any sense to be in the open telemetry collector.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good call. We're purposefully trying to do as little marshaling and processing in the ingester as possible, which is actually putting a little bit more work on the distributor and a little bit more features. And I think some of the search design that Marty showed was kind of focused around that, how we're doing work in the distributor level and passing it on to the ingester. Cool. All right. This was a good meeting. This is a good community call. Thank you all for showing up and discussing and having questions and contributing ideas. We'll take everything that was mentioned, I'll take back. There's a lot of those Grafana comments about some of the UI. We'll take that back to the team and continue to develop that. Please show, if you can show up to the next one, we can continue to provide roadmaps. Hopefully at that point we'll have additional ideas or maybe a feature flag you can actually turn on in Tempo and Grafana to see some of this and play with it yourself. Yeah, please stay in touch with the community and the team, and you will see a lot of this develop fast, we hope. All right. Take care, everybody, and we will see you when we see you.
Cool. Thanks.
Yep.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.